Welcome to Conversations from the Crease on the Great Goalies Radio Network, where the soul of goaltending lives.
Got it back, one hand pass to course, and the wrap around the save, rebound, and a save by Ranford. Going alone. That happens. Oh, and a save by Ranford. Puts on the break, can't get a shot away in front to Ashton. Save by Ranford. Oh, what a stop.
Out of position, in comes Howard, all by himself, all sorts of time, goes to his forehead and the kick save by Bill Ranford.
Now, here is your host, Bob Zalabak.
All right, welcome into episode number 1 of Conversations from the Crease. We're really excited today for our first ever guest. He is Director of Goaltending for the Los Angeles Kings. It is Bill Ranford. Let me tell you a little bit about him, though. If you were too young to see Bill play as a player, you need to get on Google and you need to start searching some highlights because he was fantastic. He was an absolute stud during his career. So he played for the Edmonton Oilers, Boston Bruins, Washington Capitals, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Detroit Red Wings. 240 career wins, 2 Stanley Cups as a player, including the Conn Smythe in 1990, 1991 NHL All-Star. Also won the 91 Canada Cup and the 1994 World Championship. So an absolute beast as a goaltender, but also twofold, an absolute beast as a goalie coach and goalie director. So he's been with the Kings for almost 20 seasons now. 2 more Stanley Cups, but absolutely put together sort of a goaltending factory, and we're going to get into it a little bit. But welcome, Bill Ranford, to Conversations from the Crease.
Thanks for having me on.
First question, I'm really interested in it. How did you catch the goalie bug? What got you involved in goalie? Like, what made you say, like, that's the position I want to play away all those years ago?
I think it's usually twofold. Either you're the younger sibling that gets thrown in the net, or you're fascinated by the equipment. And for me, it was the fascination of the equipment. My dad was in the Canadian Armed Forces, the military, and one of the guys that he played hockey with was a goalie, and I was absolutely fascinated by the equipment from day one.
Nice. Did you have a favorite goalie growing up?
I had 2. I had Ken Dryden, obviously with just passed away with the Montreal Canadiens, and then my number 2 guy was Mike Palmateer, and I think Mike Palmateer was, I probably played a little bit more to the style of Mike Palmateer than Ken Dryden.
So when you played, you kind of played in the golden age of goaltending. What was that like? Playing against what I would consider probably some of the best goalies in the history of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting time. I think it was, a different time because I think the goalies were more individuals. You could tell when Eddie Belfour, was in the net. You could tell when it was Kirk McLean. You could tell when it was Dominic Hasek. Guys were really different individuals. And, not that it's a bad thing the way that today's game is, but, there's too much of the cookie cutter and not as much, individuals. And I think that's starting to change a little bit because goalies are starting to understand that once you become predictable, it makes it tough to be successful. So you're starting to see, a lot more hybrid goalies that are doing different things and having success with it.
Let's talk about the 90 Stanley Cup, but I just want to compare it to the 88 Stanley Cup. So in 88, you were the backup to Grant Fuhr, and then 90, you're the guy. Compare those two for me, and then just from your mindset perspective of going from being the backup and then being the main guy.
Well, I think I got traded from Boston to Edmonton at the deadline, and just going through that experience of, learning what it takes to win, the ups and downs of a playoff series, the ups and downs of, the playoffs itself, going from round to round, not realizing, a lot of times they talk about the first round being one of the hardest because that's where a lot of the upsets happen. But then it's that ability just to get to the next round. The health of your team really comes into play if you can stay healthy. And then the pressure, just that until you've experienced it, it's hard to explain, but as each round starts, the pressure just gets amped up even more. And when you get into the final, both teams are running on all cylinders, and the level of hockey is just out of this world. And so I think just learning that in 1988, watching Grant Fuhr, how he dealt with the ups and downs of a series, going from round to round, really helped me out a lot, moving into that playoff series, playoff run in 1990.
90 to probably 95. I mean, you played in some really pressure-packed situations. You obviously had the 90 Cup, Conn Smythe winner. In that 90 series, like there's some weird stuff that happened in the final, like the power went out, right? And dealing with the Boston Garden just in general, I think is kind of interesting. But then you went in the Canada Cup. You were spectacular in the Canada Cup. And then win the World Championships. I think Canada hadn't won for a while, I think, in the World Championships, right? So we talk about our goalies all the time about like the mental skill or just being able to deal with pressure and be able to stay, without distractions. Like, how did you dial it in for such a long period of time over the course of those years of being what I would consider probably like the best money goalie at the time? Like, how did you lock yourself in mentally?
Yeah, I mean that's always an interesting one. I think the biggest thing I was ultra competitive. I kind of, whether you like it or not, I took that kind of the mentality, me versus them. I always, my goal was I had to be better than the guy down at the other end. So I really simply broke it down to that, one versus one. I had to be better than the guy in the other end, and if I was, we had a good chance of winning. Not always guaranteed. You can still play well and not win, but I think over a 7-game series, I always felt that if I could be better than the guy at the other end, we had a really good chance of winning.
Let's talk a little bit about the 91 All-Star game, because that was fantastic for me, because from Chicago here in the old stadium. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I got to slide a little bit. I just got the sun rays coming in here. Going to switch seats here a little bit. The biggest thing for me, obviously, number one, especially as being a military, growing up in the military family, obviously that national anthem was one of the most amazing experience of my lifetime. They talked about the roof shaking. It was incredible. I have to tell you that the All-Star game, it was a real ups and down of my first and only All-Star game that I appeared in. Obviously, John Muckler was the coach. I was picked instead of Eddie Belfour after Eddie coming off a great season. There was a tough part of you're at your first All-Star game and you're getting booed constantly, so having to deal with that was tough. But just to go through that experience of the best on best at that time of where everybody was at that particular season, and to be in a room with some of the greats was just an unbelievable experience for me, and something I'll never forget. And just playing in Chicago Stadium, one of the most iconic buildings of all time. And then you add the national anthem for that particular night, and everybody says it was the loudest and craziest probably national anthem in the history of the league, and maybe even in the history of sport. It still gets talked about right up there with some of the greatest of all time. Whitney Houston for Super Bowl, and then probably the latest one, Chris Stapleton was incredible.
Yeah, I apologize on the Blackhawk fan base. Yeah, we were a little too funny to that.
Well, no, I love it. That's the passion of their fans, and people don't realize. You mentioned it. The Wirtz family didn't televise the home games, so there's a passionate group of fans in Chicago, and there still is, and will always will be.
Yeah, a lot of nights by the radio for me.
Old school, a little bit of old school. Yeah.
So Oilers Flames, just, I mean, That was a nasty, nasty rivalry. You were then with the Bruins, so Bruins Canadians obviously gets nasty, and then with the Red Wings at the end, I know not a long time there. Which one was? I mean, obviously you were in the Oiler one and the Flames one the longest, but which one like just was?
Oh, the Battle Alberta, well, just it was as nasty as it gets. It's really quite funny now because at that time, you would have nothing to do with anybody that was involved with the Calgary Flames. You wouldn't talk to them. You know, summer would come along, you'd cross the other side of the street if you saw somebody coming down the sidewalk that was a flame. You just
Yeah.
there was no interaction, and then after I retired, I did first 3 or 4 years after I retired, I did some alumni games, and then you actually meet some of these guys and that you absolutely had no time for, and they're actually pretty good guys. So it's and then one of the greatest guys maybe of all time for the game of hockey, Lanny McDonald. Like you sit back and go, okay, how and why did I hate him?
Yeah.
Just one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But you put Plinsky and Joel Otto, guys like that I played with after, and I was like, yeah, crazy. But that was the mentality. You just whatever it took to beat them, and yeah, there was a hate is a strong word, but that's how you were kind of introduced to it, and kind of a crazy time. And I think next one probably for me would have been, the Boston Montreal, but it just didn't have the same vibe for me as it did when the Edmonton Calgary one.
So I'm just a huge gear guy, so you
Yeah,
were Vaughn pretty much the whole way. I think early on Legacy, right? And then Divisions, I think at the end.
yeah, yeah.
Why you were like brand loyal the whole time? What about Vaughn?
Well, number one, I liked the equipment, and Ross Agathis was the kind of the guy that was repping and owner of the Canadian side, and he just treated me well. I was the type of guy that didn't use a lot of equipment, but when I needed equipment, and I kind of needed it now, and Ross was unbelievable throughout my whole career, and it wasn't till I was traded to Detroit that obviously Mike Vaughn's right there in the Detroit area. That was the first time that I used the U.S. equipment. But yeah, pretty much I was the Canadian Vaughn brand my whole career. Loved it. Got treated well by them, and yeah, I was Vaughn through and through.
Kids will be surprised by this. Like, how long would your sets last?
Yeah, crazy. I would be lucky if I'd start breaking in one set, and I might try and get into a second set leading up into the playoffs. But back then, for me, I was just really particular about my equipment and how it felt, and it would take me sometimes 2-3 months to break in the second set of pads. Guys now, they take it out of the plastic and put it on and play with it. It's just totally different. My gloves, I'd use probably one game glove that I'd start off with two, find one that I liked, and I might use that the whole year. And then I'd have probably anywhere from 2 to 3 practice gloves, because they would just break down from using them so much more. And then blockers, it was kind of 4 to 5. Just when the palm would break through the palm, then I'd go to a new one. But yeah, I didn't use a lot of equipment. I was one of the guys that basically one set and maybe a second if I was lucky.
Stick wise, Sherwood, I think I remember. But then early on, so brand, was it Chimo?
Chimo.
Yeah, Chimo. What was that?
Chimo was the French version of Sherwood.
Oh, okay.
So the Droulet family had the Chimo and the Sherwood. Grant Fuhr was already using Sherwood, so they put me into Chimo. And then once the licensing changed, where you had to pay per stick, Sherwood eliminated the Chimo stick, and I was Sherwood for the rest of the way.
You had some great masks, like the original, the 90 mask. I remember that's the first time I was introduced to Bill Ranford. Like that mask was pretty sweet. Was that Greg Harrison, or who is your painter?
Yeah, I had Harrison for until I went to when I went to Boston was when I switched over to Pro Choice.
Okay.
And it just Greg Harrison just wasn't making as many masks, and it was hard to, when when you need a mask, you need a mask. And um, and I think, I got to the point where it was the Pro Choice was pretty much identical to the Harrison mask, and made the switch, and I was Pro Choice for the rest of the way.
What was your favorite one?
Probably my favorite one was probably the graphics that I had for the 90 Cup run. I think was probably my favorite of the time. And then probably next was probably my Tampa mask. I had a buddy of mine that helped me out with some of my masks. It was a graphic designer, guy that I met over in Germany when I was a kid, Jeff McLean, and he did designed a couple of my masks, my Washington and Tampa. Boston, basically, I got there and they sent out the mask and sent it back. Like there was no messing around. They decided what was on that. So I was fine. It's kind of later on in your career that, the individual masks started to come into play, where guys are allowed to design their own and stuff. So I was lucky enough to catch the tail end of that.
Now, as a coach, so obviously gear, when you're a player, you want it to look good, you look at the style, all that stuff. As a coach, are you require your goalies to have a certain pattern, or no pattern? You can't do this, or you can't do that, or you can't wear a dark pad or anything like that?
I'm not a big fan of the dark pad at all. I think it makes the guys look small. That's about the only thing. I'm not going to go out and say not do it, but we had the one year with Ben Scrivens. He went with the dark pads, and they just looked tiny on him.
Yeah.
And it was actually our Dean Lombardi, the GM, that kiboshed them. He didn't like the way they looked, so I didn't even have to. It wasn't even me that had to deal with it. But I just give my opinion, and guys have somewhat followed it. And if they want to go darker, they can go darker. But I like the look of more of a white pad, because I think the goalie looks bigger in it.
Did you have a favorite graphic, like even if it wasn't yours, like of all time? Like, what would be your favorite graphic?
I think just the classic, the one that I had in the mid '90s was the one that that was my favorite. And I mean, I think of our era, probably Felix. His pads were pretty cool. He was kind of the first one that kind of changed the design aspect of it on it, and they can do so much now. It's just completely changed.
Playing days are over. A lot of kids don't know, but you're in Miracle, right? Is that you did all the Jim Craig on ice stuff? How did that transpire?
Well, the movie was shot in Vancouver, and I just retired, and there was a bunch of ex-players that were in the movie, and they knew that I just retired, and they asked me about doing it, and I just I retired to be at home, not go right back out on the road, because the movie parts were going to be shot in Vancouver, and then Prince George has opened up their new building, and they were going to shoot out all the Lake Placid stuff up in Prince George. And, then I was going to be away for a month and a half. And I'm like, no, not interested. So, kind of nothing really happened with it. And then Disney is known for kind of tight budgets, and they found out how much it was going to cost to be able to ship camera parts and all that sort of thing up to PG, because it's not easy to get up there.
Yeah.
They decided to keep the movie in Vancouver, and they started shooting out all the Jim Craig stuff. And basically, they were couple of days into shooting, and that's a lot of money, and it wasn't really turning out well. And my phone started ringing off the hook from different people involved with the movie to ask if I'd come out and maybe look at doing it. So they invited me onto the set, looked kind of cool, realized that, I could be, in my own bed every night. I could be in a Disney movie, which
Yeah.
was really cool for the kids because my girls were young at the time. And we kind of made a family decision that, hey, let's try it, see what happens. And, kind of went in there, and I think I was there like a month and a half, and shot out. We did all the Jim Craig stuff, and all the footage was sent off to La La Land into LA, and I think they did one of the best movies of all time.
Yeah, 100%. So it's so
Yeah.
cool. How did the draw of coaching? How did you get back into coaching, and kind of take me through that path?
Well, I was as soon as I got back home to Vancouver, I got a phone call to be involved with the Coquitlam Express. So I was just a small share part owner of the Express. Dave Lowry, Kirk McLean, Darcy Rhoda, and myself were all involved with a group of guys that owned a fishing lodge. And yeah, I just started dabbling in it a little bit. Would go out every once in a while to help out the goalies. So that, it's something that I never really thought I'd really get into, and started dabbling in it. And then 2 or 3 years later, I got a call from an old teammate, Dean Chenoweth, and Ian Clark had moved on to Florida and was not really able to commit to working with Seattle any longer. So Dean invited me to work with him in Seattle, and that's kind of how I got my start. I spent a year with them and learned a lot from Dean. He came out of the kind of the Hockey Canada umbrella, and learned a lot about preparation, that sort of thing, and coaching. And then the Vancouver Giants job came available, and obviously right in my own backyard. And having a chance to work with somebody like Don Hay, who is just an absolute legend in the world of junior hockey, and started to just kind of grow my coaching experience and learning from one of the best. And then one afternoon, got a phone call from Mark Crawford after he was hired by the LA Kings, and that's how it kind of all started.
To be a coach for that long in an organization is just incredible. And I was talking to some of the coaches in our group just about how the infrastructure that you put together and the guys that have come through there, is like a factory almost. I mean, you take guys, Martin Jones, Scrivens, you had mentioned before, Bernier. Obviously, everybody knows Jonathan Quick, and just how amazing it was. And here in Chicago, Blackhawk fans obviously know how well he played against us in the playoffs. How did you begin? Like, you get this job, and it's the NHL, and it's like, and now 20 years later, like when you look back on it, what were the pieces that you put to build this goalie factory and made it so successful? Obviously, without giving away any of your secrets to any other organization, but like if you can look back on it and say, hey, these are the pieces that were really important to the foundation.
Well, I think, at that time, there was no manual on how to be a goalie coach in the NHL, and I think now there's a lot more things in place within different organizations, and you work to put something together so that there is some structure. But I think the biggest thing for me was, obviously, probably one of the things that was not important, but that helped me along the way was I experienced already what all these guys are going through. I played in the minors. I played in the NHL, the ups and downs of good teams, bad teams, average teams. I'd experienced that. So I think that gave me some knowledge to help out the guys along the way. And then just, my mantra with all our guys was attention to detail, work ethic. I never ever touched on technical until we had that part of it down pat. Yeah. With the detail and work ethic, and then we went on to the technical part. And the irony behind it is, I played in a different era and a different style, but I learned the technical side along, as I moved along, and you talk about a guy like Jonathan Quick. He played a little bit more like I did, but I knew for the health of his body, we had to, kind of roll it back a little bit and add a little bit of technical and structure to his game to make it easier on his body. And he was a student of the game and willing to learn and willing to change. But I also, didn't want to create a cookie cutter goalie. If you look at, you mentioned all the names that you mentioned, and all those guys are different. You're not going to say, oh, he was I never wanted to say anybody to say, hey, he was an LA King goalie, because, cookie cutter. I wanted people to say he was an LA King goalie because his detail and his work ethic. And that's kind of the way I approached it.
Yeah, that's what that's what I love. You're not take a guy and completely change his game. And you could tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like when I look at the guys that you work with, you've enhanced their natural talent, given them some details and technique of things to do. But it's not like if you like a Francois Allaire goalie, you know who that is, right? You've
Yes.
seen those guys or a certain school. And I think that's what's cool about every goalie on my list here is a different kid altogether.
I always thought that, for the goalie to get to that level, he had to be doing something right.
Yeah.
So, they've got their given talent that they had, and, you work with it. I had one rule. If what they were doing was costing us hockey games, that's when we changed. That was always my hard rule. If it wasn't working, then we're going to change it. If it started costing us games, then we had to make changes. And that was my one rule. And guys were okay with that.
Yeah, I love that.
Scrivens was probably the first goalie that I kind of had to break down and start over. And because of that, and I proved it to him one day in practice. We had a optional practice, so I only had about 7 or 8 shooters, and I told every single guy to shoot just over the pad on either side. He didn't stop one puck. It either hit him or it went in.
Yeah.
And that's how I started it. And so, I just talked to him afterwards, and I said, hey, listen, what did you notice about that practice? He's like, well, a lot of pucks went in. Yeah, because you have no access to the puck the way you're holding your hands. So we just went back to, breaking down the stance a little bit, getting his hands a little bit more traditional, and just kind of started working from there. And kudos to Ben. He was willing to put the work in, and we just started just with the basics of being in a stance, changing his hand position a little bit, and letting him, catch pucks and take pucks off the blocker. And he ended up signing an amazing contract in Edmonton after we traded him. So, good for him. Good for him.
I mean, just the list is amazing. And I mean, even, Kemper looks great. I watched a little bit the other night, and Forsberg.
Yeah, no, Darcy was an interesting case. We got Darcy out of Minnesota the first time, and he kind of, hit rock bottom, and the irony behind it was probably most of Darcy's success was against us in LA. So when we got him, I just thought the piece of clay was already there, and just made some minor adjustments, but he just hit rock bottom with an organization. And sometimes that's the time that you can really benefit, because that's when they're probably most willing to listen and make little tweaks to the game. And we did the same thing with Jack Campbell. They get to a point in their career where they've hit a tough spot, and if you can turn that around, they'll go on to play a long time, and both guys have. Yeah. So, I always say, I had a small part in it, but unless the individual is willing to put the work in, it doesn't matter what I say. And I think I've been very fortunate in my time with all these guys that were willing to try things. And I'm sure you've heard it, but I use the analogy, tools in the toolbox. You give them a tool. If it works, put it in the toolbox. If it doesn't work, chuck it away and try another one. And that's kind of what we did with guys when if they stumbled a little bit, or we got them from another organization where they kind of, their time ran out, and they needed a change. And we were fortunate enough to, when you have a guy like Jonathan Quick that was a starter for you for, 12, 14 years, all these guys that you're talking about that we're able to make little changes to their game and make them successful, they became assets, which became draft picks, or players to make our team better over the years. So just unfortunate that they kept going up against a guy that Jonathan Quick that just had has had an amazing career and still playing and still competitive.
One year you played over 4,000 minutes, which is crazy. Now the NHL is more like you got a 1A and a 1B. Is that a necessary evil because we found out that the mental, the toll and the physical toll is too much, or is it the old adage of if you have two, you don't have one? Are there just not those guys anymore that, from year to year, you knew these are the top 10 goalies in the league and they're going to play 65 games? Or is it just maybe more of a necessary thought of we need to back off the load management and give them less starts?
I just don't think they're, the league, it's probably going on 5-6 years ago, lost probably 15 legitimate starters, and we just haven't found the goalies yet to replace them. And I think it'll get there. It'll start to climb back up. And right now, so it's more just there isn't that goalie that's been able to take that type of work on. It's not like we all did it. The year that you're talking about, I think I played 77 games that year, and I think the record is 78, and there was a couple of Furzy and might have been Cujo or somebody like that played 78, I believe. The game's changed a lot. We practiced every single day when I played, and then I averaged, there was a 7-8 year stretch where I think I averaged, 60, 67 or 68 starts a year. That's just all you knew. It's changed a little bit right now, but it's one of those things that, the guys can do it. And it's changed a lot now where they have way more days off than we ever did. So there's lots of time for the body to heal and rest. And I just don't think there's been, those goalies that have come along yet that are ready to take on that role. Some that are close that will, and it'll build back up again. But when you don't have that guy that can handle the 60 plus games, then you have to go to the platoon system, the 1A, 1B. But, for me, the teams that are successful are the guys that have that workhorse that carry them and carry them in the playoffs.
Do you think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but especially like in my wheelhouse with the younger kids, do you think where it's being overcoached at the younger ages, and like everybody's got a personal coach and everyone's got they're going to 4 goalie camps a summer and different stuff like that, and they're getting maybe, like you said, cookie cutter, a little bit more robotic. Do you think that it's getting to that stage where it's getting overcoached a little?
Absolutely. I mean, I know myself, just at our level, there's days where I would mentally go into that day and say, I'm not going to talk to the goalies, let them work it out themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the difference of my time to what with everybody having their individual goalie coaches or 2 and 3 goalie coaches. Too much going on in the goalie's head. Sometimes they have to figure it out themselves. That Mike Buckley, who's our goalie coach in LA now, is a big component of that. Like, sometimes our goalies have to figure out themselves. We can't be giving them the answers all the time. And that's kind of how I feel. And I think it should not be a 12-month sport. I think, you have to, especially as young kids, I think it's so important to play other sports, become an athlete. And I think that's what you're seeing where there's the big influx of Russian goalies right now, because they're now they want an athlete first, goalie second. So they're looking for these athletes. They're training them to be athletes first and then becoming goalies. And I think that's where we we need to get back to that a little bit in North America. And everybody says, well, if Johnny is going to be on the ice every day all summer long, he's going to be a step ahead of my son or my daughter, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as the hockey season ended, my skates went in the bag, ball glove came out,
Right.
and baseball till hockey season started again.
Yep.
And somehow I was able to play 15 years in the league.
Yeah.
So that's the thing for me. I think the baseball or playing soccer or a lot of kids, lacrosse, different types of sports that teach you to be an athlete uh, are important for being a great goalie.
Yep.
If like the hockey school goalie will only get you so far.
I totally agree. If you look at Finland and Sweden and Russia, like you talked about, it seems like they're on the same page across the board with the people who are developing the goalies. But like even here, like in Chicago, we'll get a kid back from the summer and he'll have all these different concepts they're called something different, but they're really the
Yeah.
same stuff because every goalie coach is telling a parent, hey, this
And
is
that
what we do.
and that's what, there's smaller countries and that's what they've been able to do, which you got to give them credit. They've streamlined it. I mean, you look just in where I'm in Vancouver, and there's 15 different goalie schools, and they're all biting for the same dollar,
Yeah.
and they got to be different so that they can bring in the client. And sometimes it gets forgotten. It's all the bells and whistles, and what gets forgotten is actually the goalie's got to stop the puck.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's
However it
just
was.
such a competitive market, and it's no different in the hockey hotbeds in the United States. There's more and more goalie schools opening up, more and more goalie coaches coming along, and it's become a competitive business. And they're wanting to do something different to be able to bring in the clients instead of just worrying about the bottom line, and that's stopping the puck.
I look at goalie when I was a kid, and I looked at it the same as being a pitcher or being a quarterback. That's how I look at goalie, the hero, everything relies on the goalie. And I don't know that
Where are the goat? Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that it gets that kind of prestige. Like, what do you think we need to do to get more kids interested in playing goalie, falling in love with it like you and I did? Like,
Well, I think USA Hockey is going it about the right way. I forget the program, what it was called, but they're doing those introductory goalie sessions where they have the quick strap on pads and stuff, and I think that's smart. I think the biggest thing also is the puck hurts,
Yeah.
and the equipment is so much better now.
Yep.
And so when the kids actually put the equipment on and it doesn't hurt, that changes the aspect of it. Whereas in my day, the equipment wasn't very good, and the puck hurt.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of it. But I think just the way USA Hockey has set up that Learn to Be a Goalie program, whatever it's called, I think is the right way of doing it. Just gets kids trying it, and that's how you're going to get more goalies in the net. And all of a sudden they go in and they like it, because that's really what draws individuals to the position. They go in, they love it. They love that aspect of being the last line of defense, or they love the aspect of being able to make these acrobatic saves and that sort of thing. But if they don't try it, how are they going to know if they like it or not? Yeah. So it's just finding a way of setting up those Saturdays once a month that this is a goalie day, and come in and try it. Yeah. And I think that's, USA Hockey is going about it that way, and finding the equipment that you can, strap on quicker, and away you go.
So I love making drills and seeing if they work, and trying to piece them together. And then when you get a good drill, it's a really great moment. I feel like, it's like got something accomplished. But do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, there's always it's always great when it works out, not so much when it doesn't work out.
Right.
I don't know if I have a favorite drill, but the one thing that I learned is simple is better. You know, you don't have to have all these bells and whistles and tricks into a goalie drill. And that's where my attention to detail and work ethic comes into play. That if you have the detail in the drill, you can make a simple drill as tough as you want if you have the detail in it. But we have a fun compete drill that we do still to this day. That it's both good for the goalies and good for the players. And why I like it is because it forces your goalie to have structure to start, but at any time during this drill, it forces you outside of the box. You know, to have that structure, try and have that structure outside of the box. So we have a shooter, you know, kind of between the top of the circles and the blue line. Shooter passer, I would call it. And I usually do it, or a goalie coach usually does it. You have two players come off a dot you bang your stick, and both players come off the dot, and you start with a shot pass. So they have to try and deflect it at the goalie, and then it becomes live.
Okay.
And it's just a pure compete drill. You can only have one pass off of a rebound, and the way you score it is if the goalie covers the puck, it's a goalie point, and if the players score, it's a player point. And the top of the circles are the guidelines, so the goalie can either they miss a shot and it goes past the top of the circle, or the goalie can save it and shoot it out past the top of the circle. But as soon as it clears, so you can have a rep that could go 15 shots as long as they keep it inside the inside the top of the circle, or you could have one missed shot slides out the top of the circle and is done. But the big thing is point for a goal, and then a point for when the puck is either smothered into the netting or past the top of the circle. And we call that our compete drill, and the players love it, and we make teams of two for the players, and then we have, you know, anywhere from 2 to 3 goalies, and they have to see what their longest run can be for the goalie to decide which goalie wins.
I love that. I love it. I've have some footage from Sparks, from Garrett Sparks. He incorporates a lot of he'll talk about you a lot. You know, what did you guys see from him that, you know, got him eventually, you know, back into the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about Sparksy was he just had a natural puck stopping ability. You know, where I talked about, you know, he was not robotic at all. You know, we still look at the game that he got called up, comes into Washington and steals 2 points for us in Washington, played an outstanding game, and that was his one NHL game with us. But obviously, most of his time was in the American Hockey League in Ontario. But for me, it was just he had a pure puck stopping, reading release ability that a lot of guys don't have. He wasn't the prettiest guy to watch, but
yeah.
I think that was probably the thing that we always talked about him the most, that his ability to read a release and just the pure shot stopping ability. But like we said, it wasn't always pretty, but he got the job done.
Yeah, he says that all the time. I don't care what it looks like. Just stop it. I mean, it's the truth. So
and then he was known. He was always known for the checkered pads too from his Toronto days. So
he was. I heard. I have to ask him about it because I keep forgetting about it. But I heard him. He was on a podcast and he had said that Lou Lamoriello told him he couldn't wear those anymore. Why? It's always the GM getting involved. It sounds like, because Corey Crawford told me the same thing about Dale Talon didn't like him wearing black pads. So it seems like the GM just always phoning down on the goalies.
It's funny. I have to admit, Corey was the only one that of my time that, just because he was so darn big, that pulled it off. I have to admit, it looked amazing. I just didn't. I wasn't a fan because they always look small, but somehow he pulled it off in those all black pads. They did look good.
Bill, thank you so much for your time. The last question: what is your favorite thing about being a goalie?
Oh man, I think I always looked at looked at it as the last line of defense. You know, you're the last line of defense, and you could be the difference maker by being that last line of defense. I think that's what drove me for the number of years that I played the position, and probably the reason why I don't put the pads on anymore. For that same reason. I think that's just the way it brought out the innermost competitive spirit in me as being that guy that could make the difference as the last line of defense.
I heard that you put them on once a year. No more.
I have, since I've gone into the director role, I have not put the pads on, but I used to, Andrzej Kopitar always wanted me to put it on at least once. There was a stretch there, the one year where they needed me to put the pads on for a morning skate. And then I was, anytime Jonathan Quick played, he got on a roll where he wasn't taking the morning skates. So I was doing it, and then it just got to be too hard on my body. Yeah. But I probably went a month and a half where I was doing the morning skates.
Wow.
Yeah. But I usually, once or twice a year, put it on. Kopi always wanted me. He always wanted me to let me know. And or there'd be the odd early morning, for an afternoon game where we had guys that were coming back off an injury that they really wanted a goalie to shoot on. I'd put the pads on for that every once in a while. But as far as a kind of a practice kind of setting, once a year.
Wow, that's cool. You got to
don't miss it.
Don't miss it at all. Not at all.
It's just so like I said, I'm just so competitive.
Yeah,
and my body would just ache because I was a stand-up. Like I can't butterfly, never could. So you just have to be so on point with your positioning and everything, and loved it when I did it. And then the next day I'd be sore all over just because you use muscles that you just don't use. Now I just play out. I'll play out, but I don't play in.
Oh, so you'll skate out.
I'll skate out.
Yeah. Goals. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't score goals. I just play defense.
Defense. All right.
I become a goalie in hockey in players' equipment.
Shot blocker. You need to get the Craig Ludwig.
Yeah, exactly.
Guards.
That's a perfect analogy. A perfect player for the way I play. Ludwig with this shot. I just don't have the shin pads, the flared out shin pads that he used to wear.
All right, Bill, thank you so much. Episode 1, Conversations from the Crease. Goalies, if you haven't checked out Bill Ranford, check him out. His playing days, just an absolute stud. Has built a great program in Los Angeles, just a goalie factory. So thank you to Bill Ranford, Director of Goaltending for the Los Angeles Kings. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much for coming on episode number 1. You'll always be the first guest in our podcast library.
All right, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
You just listened to Conversations from the Crease with host Bob Zalabak on the Great Goalies Radio Network, where the soul of goaltending lives. Like and subscribe for more goalie-related content, and we'll see you next time in the blue paint.